Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Africa, tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. America, tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze.
You are listening to African Father in America podcast by Simon Javanokelo, live from Seattle, Washington, USA.
Thank you for being here with us. This is another amazing day here in Seattle, Washington. It's exactly 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and I am joined here by the incredible Gogo Rutendo Ngara, who is our special guest. We are live streaming on YouTube, and we are also live on Clubhouse. I encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, and also if you're on Clubhouse, I encourage you to share the conversation and ping in your friends and your community to join us for today's conversation, where we will be dissecting a wonderful proverb from Ghana that says an army of sheep led by a lion can defeat an army of lions led by a sheep. This proverb felt like a tongue twister to me, and I'm so lucky that Gogo Rutendo Ngara is here to help us unpack it. So instead of me sharing what this proverb means to me, I truly want to thank you, Gogo Rutendo Ngara, for taking the time, even though you're traveling, to join us for this weekly session. And I want to just give you the chance to share how you're doing and also what this proverb from Ghana means to you.
Thank you so much, Simon. Thank you once again for having me on this platform. And I know it's very early for you where you are. Where we are here, we've just had a thunderstorm, a summer thunderstorm, which is always wonderful because the air just smells so different after the rain. And we're just really grateful for the rain because we've often had droughts here. So it's a good year for the rains. So today you have tasked me with this proverb: an army of sheep led by a lion can defeat an army of lions led by a sheep. And maybe I'll go a bit backwards before saying what my interpretation is. But something about African spirituality is that in African spirituality and African cosmology, we're always concerned about form and function. And, one of the laws is that everything has its place in time and space. Everything has its place in time and space. And when we understand this, then we start understanding the interdependence, the interrelatedness, and the interconnectedness between all things, that everything is relational. We understand relationality. And when we understand relationality, then we also understand how we interact with our environment and how we interact with the other. And this is what part of what, when we speak about Ubuntu, this is what Ubuntu is about. And what's very, very important, I think I've spoken about this before, is we draw from nature in African spirituality, and nature being, when we break down the etymology of the word nature and we take it back to its Latin, maybe to natura, to the essence or to the origin, but we go back to Kemet and take it right back to ancient Egypt, and we realize that the word stems from the word neter. Neter is all that is. It is the universal, omniscient, omnipotent, that which subsists and persists in everything and in no thing, so that is Neter. So when we speak about, honoring nature, we're actually speaking about honoring Neter. And because we do this, we realize that I know, certainly here if you come to South Africa, and I'm sure as well in Kenya, where you're from, Simon, there's, people go to national parks where you have animals and, you have, your lions and your wildlife. And here we have our big five and our small five and, all sorts of other animals. And there's usually a lot of advocacy around animal conservation because of, so much that has been done to the populations of our wildlife, so many of which are becoming extinct because, for instance, we just look at the elephants, which are poached for their tusks for the ivory trade, maybe the rhino horn for its supposed medicinal value, or lion claws, or whatever it is. We have canned hunting, we have all sorts of things that happen that have put up a lot of advocacy around nature conservation. But in African tradition, conservation was not something that you had special groups for. Conservation was what we just did by default. And before we go into understanding conservation from an African indigenous point of view, um, we live in a modern world where there's, everything is around property rights, for example. And so how much land you own. And here in South Africa, we have a lot of questions around who owns the land because of the Land Act that was passed, early in the early 20th century, which dispossessed 80% of the population, of their land, and puts, almost 20% of population into 80% of the land, and 80% of the population into 20% of the land that was not even arable, or, the lesser land. And we have all the stuff around property rights. But when we understand what property or the environment from an indigenous point of view, we do not own the land. If we go to a Batwa or a San Elder or Bushman Elder, they'll tell you we do not own the land. We are conserved by the land, and we are conserved by its spirit. We are conserved by the water, and we're conserved by its spirit. We are not responsible for the conservation of the land because it conserves us. The waters that we drink, the earth that we plant our vegetables or our trees in, the earth that holds us, with the gravity pushing down upon us. We are conserved by the land, the water, and all the spirits that they hold. And one of those ways of interacting with Nater, as I've said, everything has a place and time, in time and space, and a form and a function, is through proverbs. So proverbs, in African, culture and spirituality, play a huge role in educating us or reminding us about things such as internal and collective conservation. But totems and taboos are also something that we have here in African culture. And I'll speak from the Southern Africa because that is what I'm most familiar with. So where different clans historically, have made up different dynasties, of ancient civilization. And coming from my home country, that we have at least 25 different totems associated with different clans in that country. And these totems demonstrate the close relationship between people, between animals, and between the environment. So usually, totems are a wild animal, but they can also be a body part such as the heart or the lung. They can also be a plant, or they can also be a force of nature such as the rain that we've had falling, or water. It can be a reptile, it can be a fish, it can be a bird, or it can even be an attribute such as power or a sword. But every clan has its totem that it adheres to. And these totems are passed down from generation to generation and define our kinship. So, for example, my totem is the zebra. And so my clan is named after the zebra. And we observe the zebra in all its facets. We observe its characteristics. We observe its beauty, its black and white stripes, and the mystery of what that is. Is it a black animal with white stripes, or is it a white animal with black stripes? What is it? If we look at a zebra, there is no zebra which has got the same stripes, just like there's nobody who has got the same fingerprint, and how, even though it looks like they are very striking and they don't quite fit into nature, when they band together, they create a mirage. All those black and white stripes create a mirage that looks like water from afar. And that is how they protect themselves from predators such as lions, which is part of what our proverb today is about. And one thing about zebras is they can kick. They will kick a crocodile until it breaks its jaw, even though the crocodile is the predator, and it is a herbivore. It is usually quite. Docile in nature, but it will protect its young with that real kick. It is related to the horse and to the donkey, but it is really, really, really a unique animal. So whenever I see somebody who also has the totem of the zebra, I consider them to be my kin in my culture, irrespective of whether we share the same bloodline. But of course, if we go back far enough, we'll find that there was a common ancestor, who went in different paths and each of them revered this particular animal. So in my case, we have three brothers, going way back in our history, who took on the totem of the zebra, but then they had their own distinct paths that they went. So, for instance, my totem, we call ourselves Tembo Wakapiwa, Tembo being those of the zebra, and but then my sister, who is of the same clan, might be Majimba Kupa, which shows that there's a different almost pathway that they followed with the zebras. But what's very interesting with us as the zebras is that we all the females, irrespective of which one of those paths they take, are called Maduve, or the mother of the zebra. So these totems are passed down from generation to generation and define kinship, and we are expected to live according to the attributes of our totem. And as I said, those who share the same totem are considered relatives, even though they're not necessarily blood relatives, to the point that even though you're not related by blood, in some cultures it's taboo to marry somebody of the same totem, and you'd have to do certain rituals if it so happened that you wanted to get married to them, because you're considered to be siblings, in a way. So, having said that, the sheep and the lion are also totems that we find in African cultures, and there's certain clans that are clans that look to the sheep, and there's certain clans that look to the lion as their totems. But as I've said, form and function, everything has its place in time and space. So a lion has got a very different form and a very different function to a sheep. A sheep has got a very different form and a very different function to a lion. A sheep is a herbivore. It is mostly a domesticated animal that has moved with the herders, and become domesticated. Whereas the lion has remained a wild animal unless it happens to be in a cage somewhere. And it's considered to be the king of the jungle. It's considered to be an apex animal, the lion. And so already we can start seeing by the fact that one is domestic and the other is wild in its natural state, that they have a different form, and they therefore will have a different function. Now, the lion is naturally a predator, and it naturally predates upon animals. Well, if it happens to come across a sheep, it could predate upon a sheep. Whereas a sheep is not going to it does not predate upon a lion. Its prey, for lack of a better word, is vegetation, as grass and whatnot. And so, how would a lion or a sheep who cannot have prey as a lion be able to rouse an army of lions when it is the prey to the lion? So we have to look at what is its form and what is its function. But conversely, because a lion is a predator in its natural state, That's what it does. That's why it has got fangs. That is why it has got claws. That's why it's got a very short intestine of about 3 meters. Because with very, very powerful digestive juices. That is why it's got a smooth intestines, which is natural carnivores have very smooth intestines as opposed to almost herbivores, which have villi in their gut in order to increase the surface area for digestion, and therefore and whereas with a natural predator, it has got no villi. It's got a very smooth intestinal tract, and with very powerful digestive juices, because it has to break down raw meat. That is what its form is. It's got claws because it needs to break down the meat. It's got fangs because it needs to tear it. All of that, or those canines, all of that, which are the part of the form that has a particular function. And so it is naturally a soldier. It is naturally an army-ish kind of animal. It is naturally a warrior, and therefore it can naturally serve in the state of creating armies, which can protect the sheep. But when we look at a sheep, it is a herbivore. It's usually quite docile. It loves being in community. It's not going to really survive if it goes out into a national park. The likelihood is that it's going to it's soon going to become prey, and so its function cannot be that of rousing armies, and it definitely cannot be that of um, of defeating an army of lions. But that doesn't mean it doesn't have its function, because everything serves the whole. Everything serves the whole. So the sheep serves everything that is in its own ecosystem, in as much as the lion serves everything that is in its own ecosystem. And so from a conservation point of view, if you have the totem of a sheep or the totem of a lion, you do not kill that animal that is your totem, but you also do not kill that which it feeds on. So for myself, it is mine is the zebra, and I know that zebras are herbivores, so I'm going to be very careful with the environment that a zebra, exists in. So the waters that the zebra drinks, the plants that the zebra drinks, in as much as I'm going to take care of the zebra itself, and therefore, as a clan, we're responsible for overall conservation, because we're not just conserving the zebra, but we're conserving its whole ecosystem. So, as I've said, this is totems were a way of us creating conservation as a natural default that we do every single day, as opposed to having, special groups that are conserving. But what are the characteristics of these two animals, the sheep and the goat and the lion? So, if I may actually read from Credo Mutwa's book Isiloane, the Animal, where he goes into some of the core animals that we get, so that we can start to understand what this proverb may mean from a more expanded space. So, I'll begin with the sheep. And let me just find the page. And it says here, the sheep, the voiceless one. The Botswana people, who are the greatest and most skilled sheep farmers in southern Africa, call the sheep nku, a word with a literal meaning, the dumb or voiceless animal. The Zulus call a sheep imvu, and the Xhosa people of Transkei call sheep igusha, which is a corruption of the Hottentot name for this animal, goose. They all mean the voiceless animal. Sheep are called by this name because, unlike a goat, which bellows blue murder while it is being slaughtered, the sheep dies silently. Xhosa and Zulu Sangomas never use sheep in any of their ceremonies, because if they do, the ancestral spirits will fall silent like sheep and never talk to them or through them again. Therefore, Xhosa and Zulu Sangomas are forbidden from eating mutton. If forced to eat mutton through hunger, the Sangoma is compelled to undergo a 5-day purification ceremony afterwards. However, nonetheless, they have their function. Amongst the Botswanan Dingaka, which is healers or traditional healers, the sheep is the animal chosen for ceremonial and healing purposes. The Botswana people possess the best cure for rheumatism that I have ever come across in my travels through Africa. They slaughter and skin a sheep, strip the patient naked, and wrap the warm hide around him or her. This must be worn for about half a day. When the sheep's hide is wrapped around the patient, the wool side faces outwards so that the patient's body is in contact with the warm, fatty inner side of the skin. After a few hours, the patient's symptoms subside noticeably, the muscles becoming less stiff and painful. After many years of observing this form of treatment, I have come to the conclusion that there must be something in sheep fat that reduces rheumatoid pain. Another successful method of treating rheumatism that is practiced by the Botswana is to rub the patient from head to foot with raw sheep fat using a piece of sheepskin or wool. Another interesting form of treatment involves binding a number of flat, thin, polished copper sheets to the patient's body and lightly sprinkling them with salt water before wrapping the fresh sheepskin around the patient. Usually 2 copper sheets are used. One is tied to the small of the patient's back and the other to the patient's chest. This treatment is used on hot days when the weather is clear and sunny and when the patient can sit outside in the sun for several hours. So that's the one function, is combating rheumatism. But they say combating madness with a sheep's brain. The Botswana and Zulu people believe that a worm lives inside the brain of a sheep. This is called ituku, which means the worm of insanity. It is believed that a sorcerer can remove such a worm from a dead sheep's brain and use it to bewitch a person, causing him or her to become mad. The ituku worm is carefully dried and burnt with pungent healing herbs, which are then placed while smoking on charcoal under a mad person's nostrils so that smoke may be inhaled. This form of treatment causes the mad person to sneeze, and as soon as this happens, the Sangomas believe that he or she has sneezed out of the worm of madness. When a person is being treated for madness, he or she is forbidden from wearing any copper ornament and is fed a regular diet of half-cooked fresh sheep's brains and a lot of skillfully boiled freshwater fish until he or she shows signs of recovery. This is Psychiatry 101 in African spirituality. African people believe that when a person goes mad, it is because the worm of insanity has eaten many holes in that person's brain. Feeding the victim a diet of sheep's brains and fish is believed to close the holes created by the worms. So this is kind of like in homeopathy where we talk about like treating like. When Africans tell a person that they should eat 1,000 sheep's brains, they're actually insulting him, implying that he is hopelessly mad. When treating a mad person using sheep's brains, traditional healers are very careful to use only the brains of a female sheep. It is believed that if you feed a person the brain or flesh of an aggressive animal, such as a ram, that animal's aggressiveness is passed on to the sick person. So that's one other form and function of the sheep. And the final one is the fat-tailed sheep of the Tswanas. The Tswanas believe that a fat-tailed sheep are their most prized possessions, and these animals are used only in the most sacred of ceremonies and rituals. There is no greater gift one can give to a Tswana than a fat-tailed sheep. When a young man is negotiating marriage with the parents of a Tswana girl, the first thing they'll demand of him is a fat-tailed sheep called mukwele, which means the opening or the talking sheep. This sheep must be big and fat, and it is eaten the moment it arrives by the girl's family and those whom they have elected to represent them in the negotiations with the husband-to-be. The fat of a fat-tailed sheep is not only used in the treatment of diseases such as rheumatism, but also in magical mixtures that, for instance, cause enemies to be unable to speak out against you. If a Tswana faces a serious court case, he often goes to a traditional healer who gives him, amongst other things, a putty-like mixture of various luck-bringing and protective roots that have been ground to a powder and mixed with sheep fat and that of a lion or a crocodile. So we bring in the lion now. The sheep fat in the mixture is intended to bring about total confusion in the people who testify against the accused. It is also intended to strike some of them dumb like sheep and render them completely incapable of offering coherent evidence. Sheep fat is also used in mixtures prepared to ensure success in certain business undertakings and transactions. One type of this mixture is given to a team of football players to rub on the soles of their feet before they put on their boots and walk onto the playing field. This mixture allows them to enable them to score their goals. And he says, Baba Credo says, he often sees football officials forcing an entire football team into the showers to wash their feet whenever medicine may have smeared on them to intimidate the other team is suspected. So these are just some of the functions that we find of a sheep. But what is really critical is amongst Southern Africans, they consider it to be a silent, voiceless one. And so therefore, if we were talking about an army of sheep, if it is silent and voiceless, it is not able then to create an army that is capable of protecting a lion. But what about the lion? So here I'll first read a praise poem, because that is what we do as well as, and apart from having totems, there often are praise poems that go according to those totems. So this is a praise song to the lion. Ngonyama, lion, lord of the forests, creature that puzzled our forefathers who did not know what to make of you. And they called you Ngonyama, the creature with two fleshes. They called you Ngonyama, the creature of two shapes. They said that your tail was that of a bull of the skies, of the bull of heaven. They said that your mane was that of the great baboon of the wilds. And they said that your head was nobler than that of Ingwe, the leopard. They said you were three animals in one, like God, omnipotent on high. Ngonyama, symbol of the kings of the Zulu people. Ngonyama, thunder of the valleys. You whose roar frightens the dreams out of the heads of sleeping warriors. Ngonyama, you whose footprint is never erased by the passing winds. Ngonyama, where you are smelt, there is no evil. Where your roar is heard, there is life to be found. Ngonyama, and where you are heard, there is no ill. And where you are seen, there is no fear. Ngonyama, long may you walk the plains of this land, Bayete. So just from that praise poem in itself, we start seeing the warrior attributes of the lion, and therefore that which is capable of rousing armies. The lion is an animal which African people believe to be, like the hippopotamus, a mixed animal which combines the characteristics of a number of different animals. It is believed that the lion is not an absolute carnivore, but that it has the gentle characteristics of a herbivore. Anyone who has encountered lions close up will agree with this strange belief. Left to themselves, lions will not harm human beings unless they are first harmed. I can vouch for the fact that you can pass close to a tree under which a pride of lions is resting without being unharmed. They will allow you to pass in peace. This has happened to me several times, especially while I was working in Kenya and Tanzania. Walking through the bush, too tired to be on the lookout for whatever dangers there might be, you may find to your surprise that you pass under a tree under which a number of lions are resting. And because a lion's tail ends in a tuft of dark-colored hair, African people believe that the lion has the gentle characteristics of a cow. And because the lion is such a powerful animal, the Zulu people call the lion Ingonyama, which means the master of all flesh. The name consists of two words, Ngo, which is an ancient term meaning very, very high, and Nyama, which means flesh or power. Another Zulu term for the lion is ububezu, which comes from the verb bubeza, meaning to make the final decision, supporting the belief that the lion is the king of all beasts. The Basotho and the Tsonga peoples call the lion by an interesting name, which is Tao or Ndao. This means the star creature, or a creature that came from the stars. The Mashona people call a lion Shumba. This means the royal beast. Mumba means a king of kings in ancient Shona, so Shumba means the greatest ruler of all. In ancient times, kings of the Zulu people and some of the other tribes embarked on a ritual hunt every 5 years. The law of the hunt required the king to kill a lion on his own to prove his power of kinship and to fill his people with respect to him. A great lion, usually the oldest in the area, was driven out of hiding by a force of warriors beating their weapons on their shields and shouting at the tops of their voices. The lion was driven towards the king, who would challenge it with his shield and spear and kill it single-handedly. The lion's body was then split open, and the king had to grasp the heart while it was still beating. When this was done, he was entitled to be called Silo, which is a euphemism for a great lion. While the lion is living in the bush, it is regarded as a symbol of all that is good and noble. But if the lion has turned into a man-eater, it symbolizes all that is negative and destructive. The lion is therefore used as a symbol for both good and bad. So those are just some of the attributes of the lion. And I'm just going to read a story because storytelling is key to African spirituality. And this is called King Magueva and the Lion. Many, many years ago in the land of the Zulus, there was a young king called Magueva. Magueva was a great warrior. He was a great man of courage, and he lived without fear. He was also a man of great wisdom and knowledge. One day, it is said, a group of warriors came to Magueva's village. They brought him the skin of a great lion they had hunted. The skin was to be tanned and made into a blanket for the coronation of Magueva, who at that time was still a prince. The wise men of the Zulus had studied the omens. They had looked at the birds which flew across the heavens, and by night they had studied the stars and learned what the gods wished them to do. The gods wished that King Magueva be crowned wearing the skin of a lion rather than that of a leopard. The warriors brought Magueva the skin of a lion and a fat little lion cub which they had captured during the hunt. Magueva fell in love with this beautiful animal and had his people look after it. He cared for it and it became part of him. Wherever he went, the lion accompanied him. It grew strong and powerful, and when it was about to grow a mane, Magueva said that the lion had to be set free to find the other lions in the wilderness. I cannot keep another king's slave in my village, said Magueva to his warriors. The lion has grown. Very soon it will be fully matured male. It must go into the forest and enjoy the life as Nkulunkulu has decreed. Nkulunkulu is the creator. The warriors took the young lion into the forest where they released it and then returned to Magueva. Several years went by, and then one day a terrible war broke out between the Zulu people and the Mangwani people. It was a long war resulting from Mangwani raids on Zulu caravans which traded with the Portuguese. Whenever the Zulus went up the coast, the Mangwani would leave them alone. But they would attack them viciously and suddenly when they returned, knowing that they were laden with trade goods, tobacco leaves, and shining trinkets. One day, while leading his army into battle against the Mangwani raiders, King Magueva was separated from his men by a regiment of enemy warriors. He fought bravely and savagely. He was wounded, but he was not about to give in to his murdering enemies. He fought until his shield was shred to tatters by Mangwani battle axes, until his body was covered with blood of the enemy as well as his own. As the young king was about to be overcome, out of the forest there exploded like a thunderstorm a great pride of lions. The lions were led by a large young male and leapt upon the Mangwani warriors like demons of the dark. Men screamed as they were torn by the angry lions and scattered in all directions following this sudden and unexpected attack. Men who feared no human enemy ran screaming like children from the presence and fury of the great carnivores. The lions disappeared as suddenly as they had attacked. As Magueva recovered from the surprise, he looked around and saw a familiar sight. The lion which had led the attack was limping because one of its front paws was slightly deformed. Only one animal has such a deformity, thought Magueva. It is the lion that I kept many, many years ago. Could it have saved my life? And when Magueva led his victorious army home, he turned and looked behind him in the blue distance. A lion and its females were following the group, ensuring that the king had a safe journey home. This incredible beast, it is said, later guarded King Magueva on many trading expeditions, the great king of the wild protecting the human king. And to this day, Zulu people honor and respect the lion, the monarch of the wild, and call their king Ingonyama. So that is just some reading from Baba Kredamoto's book, Isilwane. I'm not sure if it's still in print. I think it's out of print. But in that, he speaks about many of the animals, many of their totemic values, and also how they interact with humans and the environment. As I've said, we do not own the land. We are conserved by the land. We are conserved by its spirit, and we are conserved by the waters, and we're conserved by its spirit, and we are also conserved by our totems and even our proverbs, which treat us, or which we use as ways of igniting our inherent and natural intelligence in terms of how we relate to nature or nature and all that is.
Wow, thank you, Gogo. I am grateful. I just, I just feel nourished every time, you're here with us, and also the way that you walked us through the beginning of this session and dissected this proverb by sharing with us, our totems and how animals represent our totems, from the zebra to the sheep and the lion, and the stories that you shared with us, and just weaved until this moment. I'm just grateful. And I want to welcome everybody who is currently on Clubhouse and YouTube with us. This is really an amazing moment. I do want to ask you a favor, Gogo Rutendo Ngara. I would love a list of all these books by Credo Mutwa, because every time you pull an excerpt from any of his books, there's just so much. And so I would love to share that list of books with some of our community members that have been reaching out and asking questions. And then, if they have further questions, we might end up even creating a book club around him. So, I just feel that his work is profound, and the way also that, he's been to every part of the continent. Some of the stories that you are sharing, are very relatable to my own experience growing up. For example, when you're talking about the sheep, I remembered how, when it rained in Kisumu, where I grew up by Lake Victoria, it rained hard, but it rained for like half an hour, and it looked like the sheep knew this. So the sheep would line up, and they would put their heads under each other's tail, and they would just be there until the rain ends, and then they would walk away like nothing happened, And then I wanted to also share the story of the killer lions that when colonization was happening in Africa, one of the ways that the colonizers gained access to the interior of the continent was by building railway lines. But lions were stopping them and slowing down this process. And I wanted you to just speak to that, because you spoke about the story of the lion and the Zulu king, and I wanted you to just speak about, a lot of the time, these, especially in my tribe, we still have people who have, through their knowledge of animals and their totems, they tame animals like hippos and hyenas without shooting them with medicine or putting them in cages. They just talk to these animals. So I wanted you to just speak to how the lions and other wild animals in the continent were also used in the battlefield, and how, if you understand what kind of spirit these animals have, you can actually communicate effectively with them and put them into good use. But just to comment before you respond, I also was really moved by the functions of the sheep when it comes to treating people that had different, psychological issues. So thank you again so much. Go ahead and share with us just a little bit about, how animals were used in battlefield, and how, especially with colonization, how that's related to this proverb for today. And then after that, we are going to briefly hear from everyone on stage, and you are going to wrap up our conversation by your closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Simon. So I think I'm going to go, as I said, to the country of my birth, which is Zimbabwe. And in the country of my birth, there are certain great ancestors that we revere. And these ancestors, they were great priests and priestesses, and we called them the Mondoro. They were the rainmakers. They were the great shamans. They were the great mediums, but they were also the ones some of whom were responsible for leading the Chimurenga. The Chimurenga was the War of Liberation. And there's a number of whom are very, very popular or who really, really made history. And I'll name three. One was Chaminuka, who was a prophet, a great prophet. Then there was another one called Kaguvi. And then his spirit brother, his spirit sister, his spirit wife called Mbuya Nehanda. Now, Nehanda, when during the War of Liberation, songs would be sung of her because her spirit, is known to have been critical in the war against colonization, especially in the Chimurenga war. And now the thing about the Mondoro, so there's the clans, the clan totems, but then there's a particular kind of shaman, if we want to use that word, a particular type of priest or priestess, a particular type of medium, of spiritual wife of God, who is called a lion spirit, who holds the lion spirit. And when we speak about the Mondoro, they hold the lion spirit. They really hold the characteristics of the lion. And what you'd find was that a true Mondoro, one who is able to carry that lion spirit, is able to communicate with lions and master them so that they listen to him or her. And one of the names, so there are all sorts of stories about how Nehanda got her name. But one of the stories is that there was a little girl who always walked around with her pet dog, and so it was always this girl and her dog, which they called a handa, Nehanda, with her dog. But this dog was actually a lion. And it was this lion that she walked with that gave her the prowess that she took in order to be able to lead armies as a woman, in the 19th century. In terms of trying to defeat the British soldiers at the time. She was hanged, and as she was being hanged, she declared, "One day my bones shall rise again." And so in Zimbabwe, it is considered that this lion spirit gets passed on and that those bones keep rising. So that's amongst the Shona, but those who carry the lion spirit are able to communicate, not, as you said, with poison darts, not with medicines, but they're actually able to communicate in such a way that they're able to speak to the animal and completely tame it. And once they're able to tame it just by their persona of resonating at the frequency of the star animal, as we heard that one of the names of a lion means star, then that means they have ascended to that ability in their priesthood or shamanhood. Now, amongst the San people, our First Nations people, the Batwa people, you have those who are of the eland, you have those who are of the elephant, you have those who are of the leopard, and you also have those who are of the lion. And I was very privileged to be with one of the last of the Kalahari in June last year. He's about 93 years old. He was also a good friend of Credo Mutwa, of Wasanusi Credo Mutwa, and him and others would communicate with lions in this way, to the point where the story where I read of a lion literally coming to support King Magueva, where the lion would literally bring a hunt, of a gemsbok to the lion shaman as a way of giving thanks, as a way of communication, and as a way of showing solidarity and showing that they're one in the same family, because once you carry a particular totem or a particular spirit, that's your family. So, and that all comes from when we speak about Ubuntu, understanding that Ubuntu it resides in everything. Ubuntu is that all-pervasive force that resides in everything. It resides in humans in as much as it resides in the trees, in as much as it resides in the animals, in animate things, etc., and beauty and intangible things. And if we understand that and we understand the language of Ubuntu, then we can communicate with anything, including 24 lions about to attack, when you just understand their language and their frequency, and you're able to interact and then work with them for the greater benefit of the whole. Because ultimately what a lion seeks as the king, as the monarch, is the greater benefit of the whole ecosystem. That's why it's called an apex animal. So yeah, that's a bit on that.
Thank you so much. Let's hear briefly from Joy Noel. Share with us your comments to Gogo Rutendo Ngara or your interpretation of today's proverb briefly, and then we'll go to Jay and Bibi, and then come back to Gogo Rutendo Ngara to close the session for us. Thank you. Joy Noel, the mic is yours.
Oh, I don't have anything to say today. I'm not feeling too well. I'm just listening in.
I hope you feel better soon. Thank you for joining us today. Jay, share with us your thoughts. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, dear Brother Simon. I'm so glad that I was able to join this morning. Very, very briefly, the first thing that came to mind was having the heart of a lion. And thinking about individuals that are head of companies, or they're running businesses, or leading a military, that you have to be extremely strategic. And you're thinking in ways that a sheep would not think, in terms of being considered as really mild and meek and humble and easily swayed. Whereas when you have the heart of a lion, you are bold and you are courageous, and you hopefully in most cases wise decision making. So when a lion is going after a prey, they're very strategic in what they're doing. Whereas a sheep is easily, quote unquote, led to the slaughter. And so it's so much easier for an army to lead sheep in the right direction, an army of lions to lead sheep in the right directions, than for a sheep to lead lions, because their characteristics are so different. And that's my interpretation of this proverb. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us. Bibi, share with us your perspectives, please.
Good morning, all. Jay, that was very lovely. And Simon, I'm really enjoying the conversation between you and Gogo. It's amazing. But I'll get back to that. And as far as the proverbs, my thoughts were on the train, on the same train line as Jay was sharing. And my simplest interpretation will be, it's true. It's like when they say few are cold. So it's like with that, it's like it's true with lions. Lions, even in our culture, I think it's throughout everywhere. Lions being signified as rulers and kings of the jungle and stuff like that. And it only takes one or two to to get people in check. And for one, their voice is very, very powerful, very thunderous, and most of the time their intentions are well when it comes to the community. And once they put their mind to certain destination or something that they aim to accomplish, they usually go through it. But they also do need a great support team. And I do think the sheeps, they're less likely to be rebellious majority of the time. So it's like when you put them on a mission, they will obey because they don't like they don't like trouble. And I'm confusing people in sheeps, but that's what I'm leading at. They don't like trouble, and they like getting things done. So it's like when the lions lead them, of course they'll get the job done. While as lions can be really led by sheeps because they will feel like they're more powerful. So it's like instead of listening to the sheep, they'll never listen, and the job will not get done. So that's my interpretation for that. And back to Gogo, she's a great storyteller, and I'm loving all this history. And um, back to my own people, it's like um, I've heard of stories about my ancestors, how we used to be rainmakers. And yeah, so that's why it's like one of my uncle's name is Gowon, and Gowon means actually God of thunder. So it's like they used to be rainmakers. I remember my mom used to tell me that story. So it's fun that I'm learning all this. So thank you so much, and I'm done.
Thank you so much, Bibi, for your perspectives. And now I want to, invite Gogo Rutendo Ngara to close the session for us with, your closing remarks, so that we can wrap up our session today. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I unfortunately I dropped off for a little bit, but I really agree with what the sisters said around the lion-heartedness and lion-hearted leadership, and just something about lions and just being creatures of strategy. And they're also incredibly benevolent. So lions are not going to randomly kill for the sake of killing. They would behave in the way our First Nations people behave. So what happens with the First Nations people when they go on the hunt, the Batwa, is they first go into ceremony the evening before. And in the ceremony, well, this was, traditionally in the ceremony that they would go to in the evening before, they would allow the spirit of the animal that they will be hunting in the next day to appear to them within the ceremony. And of course, there'd be those that are mediums that would go into a space where they're able to be mediums for that animal. And then as part of the ceremony, they would then ask permission from that animal prior to going out on the hunt, and also ensure that any karmic forces are released prior to going into the hunt. And so by the time the warriors, the young warriors or the young hunters go out, they know exactly who they're hunting for. They're not just wildly going to go and kill any animal that's there. And usually that animal would be one that is not the strongest in the pack. It would not be the alpha male, for example, and it would not necessarily be a female that's just given birth, for example. It would be one that has firstly offered themselves over to the hunt in ceremony, and with permission, and one that's not going to disturb the ecosystem of that particular herd, if it's a herd. And that's the same with lions. That is learning from the strategy of lions. Usually they will not attack the alpha animal in the herd or the pack. They'll usually go for one who, if they have them as prey, is not going to disturb the ecosystem of that particular species, and then they're very specific about how they kill, so they will go straight for the jugular and ensure a very swift death, so that it's not releasing toxins, it's not going through painful excruciating deaths that actually renders the meat poisonous in the end. And it's actually a benevolent animal when it follows the forces of nature. And so I think there's a lot that we could learn from animals, because ultimately, and from lions, ultimately they serve the conservation of their prey, in as much as sheep also serve conservation of their prey, which is the that which they graze upon, because through their grazing they actually activate the ability for more to grow, and therefore they activate the herbal or the plant kingdom ecosystem as well. And so each of them has their form, each of them has their function.
This is Simon speaking. Gogo, I think Gogo's network is not stable at the moment, and I have someone at my door, so we have to wrap up our session in this moment. I am grateful, and I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow for another session of the Daily African Proverbs. Thank you so much, and have a beautiful, beautiful day.
African father in America. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. Tujikaze, tujikaze, jikaze. African tujikaze.